Welcome to our podcast series, Raising Saints and Forming Scholars, where we delve into your questions about the world of classical education. We were made for truth, beauty, and goodness. Let's talk about it. In this episode, we're going to look at all the different parts of our story about the art in our building. Where did it come from? Who paid for it? How does it reflect our St. Jerome curriculum? And what are other schools around the country doing with this vision? But if you want to go even deeper, we're going to talk about how beautiful art on the walls helps students create a narrative about their lives, and how they can draw out from the art and from our literature a vision for their own story. Also, what does it mean to live in this new Renaissance with this relationship between beauty and art and education? We will look at how the pre-rational part of the human person is so captivated by the art that it opens them up in ways they may not even understand to the sacred humanity of Jesus. Our entire discussion is always geared towards beauty, but the beauty of God Himself. Join us. This episode is sponsored by Mountain West Sales, serving New Mexico since 1989. Hello, welcome to our Raising Saints and Forming Scholars podcast. Today I'm here with Mr. Douglas Coombs of the St. Luke Guild and Mr. Derek Brooks of Benedictus Art, and we are going to have a conversation about all things art. So, shall we get started? Well, first, I think it would be great to talk about the St. Luke Guild, because as you may or may not know, all of our art at Holy Child is owned by the St. Luke Guild, and it's quite a story. So, Mr. Coombs, would you like to share with us about how everything got started with your visit to the monastery?
Yeah, well, I was at the Monastery of Christ in the Desert with the kids,
and let's situate ourselves. This was December of 2019?
Yes, December 2019. And, we've been at the school for about 8 years at that time, and there's been a real, conversion in our family from, not really knowing how to place art in our life to really loving it and finding ways, looking for ways to appreciate the arts more. And also been listening to a lot of Camille Paglia and Jordan Peterson.
And some of our audience members may not be familiar with both of those scholars. So Jordan Peterson, do you want to share who he is? Although he is pretty famous. Everyone knows Jordan Peterson.
Camille Paglia, she may need
Camille Paglia may need a bit of introduction. And at this point, we might say that the podcast is rated PG-13.
Everybody.
We don't want little kids around, because Camille Paglia is a controversial scholar, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, she can be very controversial.
She's a controversial scholar.
Yeah. She's a professor at an art school in New York, and she's a very interesting person, but she's open to a lot of ideas, and so she talks a lot about the importance of art, but the importance of she appreciates art in, I think, not just the modern art, but older art as well, a lot more than a lot of people do.
And I think she might remind us of the paradox, maybe, in discussing art. We have shared values with different communities you may not expect. So we don't share all of Camille Paglia's values or views, but when it comes to art, she definitely, I think, teaches our society something. And I just want to add in, while you were at the monastery way back here on the range at Holy Child, I was teaching writing to the upper school, and we had done a reflection on Rembrandt's The Prodigal Son. And I do remember thinking, and I remember telling the kids, this painting is so profound, I feel it's just going to chase you or something. And so I was really trying to think of how we would incorporate art into the new school building. So let me let you go back to your story.
So monasteries are really special places. You spend a lot of time praying and contemplating and working with the monks, and then the little bit of downtime you get, it's quiet. You don't have any responsibilities. It's except just to kind of think and manage the kids. So yeah, I just was wondering, wonder if we could just got this idea that we could put these paintings in, because the paintings they had at the monastery were just they're so amazing.
And they had the prodigal son, right?
Yeah, they had the prodigal son, which Adela had just studied and written a paper about previous year, and it really stood out to her, and she just loved that painting, and the quality on it was something I'd never seen before, and I thought, wow, this quality is amazing. Like, it's Mrs. D loves her posters to show the kids, and she shows the kids slideshows, but the quality that she had just couldn't hold a candle to what they had at the monastery. So I thought, where did they get these? And I thought, so I came back and I told you and Mrs. D about it. I said, we have to go up there and see this, because I want to see if we can line the hallways with a timeline of art and world history interwoven.
And in my mind, I kept wondering how we were going to put the timeline of the St. Jerome curriculum in our school building in a beautiful way. But I will say the question kept coming up, who is doing this art like that? and that was something that we had to pursue, because we went to the monastery, and unless I'm mistaken,
everything was out of date.
Yeah, they were kind of like, it was hard to get a hold of Mr. Brooks, was it not?
Yeah.
It took a while, I remember.
The people who knew him and had worked with him to install the art, one was now a hermit, so he didn't
I love this story because
he's
so tied with the monastery.
He didn't interact much with the younger monks, and they didn't know his story, and the other person who knew it, the story, was the prior of the monastery, who's just too busy, and
he may have been in Rome at the time, actually, too.
And then Rosie, the artist in residence there. So it was actually Rosie who put us in touch with Father John, who put us in touch with you. So that was
I just, as a Catholic school, I can't think of a more perfect story than we get our art through this dynamic at a real monastery.
Through a real hermit.
Through a real hermit, because if you study the history of education, it all begins with the monasteries. So that led us to Mr. Brooks.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah. That leads us to Mr. Brooks, who was the person involved in actually producing the art. So when we got to talking about it, we had several things going on at once. On the one hand, at our school, we really wanted to make sure we had a way to separate the art from the budget at our school. And working in an archdiocese that was facing bankruptcy, we thought it would be smart to hold the art in trust and to have a totally different organization hold the art. So that's how the St. Luke Guild came to be. But in the middle of all that, Mr. Brooks, do you want to tell us about how this ties in with Benedictus art?
Yeah. So in 2016, my friend at the monastery, Father John, asked me if I thought I could do an art project for him. So I had run a fine art landscape photography gallery in Estes Park, Colorado, for Eric Stensland for several years at that point, and so he thought that I might have some kind of ability to do fine art reproductions. And so he asked me, and I said, yeah, probably. So we just kind of gave it a shot, and it turned out really well. So they were redoing their guest facilities, working with an interior designer, so I came down to the monastery. We went through all the rooms, decided what I figured out what the sizes would need to be for each of the rooms, because I've designed hotels and businesses and offices and homes and whatever, and decided the sizes we needed for the rooms. They had the particular pieces that they wanted, so I tracked all those down through various sources and did some digital editing restoration in photo editing software, and had them printed with a company that is essentially my business partner at this point, and brought them to the monastery, and that was 2016. And so I didn't think anything of it. I thought this would be a one-time affair, and then I get a call after I had left the gallery that I was running. I'd been there nearly a decade, and I left that gallery, and I got a call from the gallery in 2020, I believe, asking if they could put me in contact with somebody who had contacted them wanting to do. I don't even know that I knew all the details at the time. So I called the number that they gave me, and I believe that's when we first spoke, and that's how everything kind of got started.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's something, isn't it? So at that time then, we asked you to come to Holy Child.
And I said, no, I don't want to meet you.
So you came to Holy Child, and we talked about different pieces that we wanted, and we just put those introductory pieces right as we were moving into this new building in 2020, right in the middle of all the COVID drama. And then we just found a real soulmate in our search for beauty in schools.
Who?
And it's just really been a wonderful working relationship that we've had. Tell us about other schools you're working with now and what's happening now.
Well, I love tracing I like looking at the chronology of how this all came about. So, Monastery 2016, a call in 2020 after Doug had tracked me down in Estes Park, and then when you got invited to speak at ICLE specifically
Right.
on the art, which was
2022.
2022, right? And I think I said something to the effect of, I mean, I would love to go, and then I found out I could go as a vendor, and then you asked if I wanted to be a co-speaker with you for your presentation, and I said that would be lovely. And I thought I was going to be wasting money paying for it to be a vendor at this conference. I didn't even have a business entity. I've had an LLC for a long time, but I wasn't focused on this particular, museum quality fine art photo reproductions of the world's great masterpieces. I wasn't focused on that at all. And so then Doug said, they have conferences like these all over the nation. We should go to some other ones, or you should look into other ones. And so we looked at Society of Classical Learning that year as well, and their theme was beauty. And I was like, okay, there's only at a certain point you just have to say, are you trying to say something, God? Because I feel like you're trying to say something.
Yeah.
And so
He'll do that.
So all that took place. Go to the conferences thinking that nobody was going to darken the door of the booth. We're swarmed with people, and people coming back the day after saying, I wanted to talk to you yesterday, but there were so many people around you, and I just had no idea this was even out there. And so fast forward to today, so I've been doing the conference circuit, I guess 2 years now, and I think one thing I've noticed is that between last year and this year, whether it's because my vision is refined and my process is more refined, or I actually think it may be a combination of these things. So I think there's probably that. I think schools have a more developed vision of what they want, and they know that they need it. And I think it's actually the deeper reason behind all of what I'm seeing now is it's a work of the Spirit. And so now I'm working with, I've been working with schools across the country. So right now, 2 schools in Wisconsin, a school in Oklahoma, Virginia, New Jersey, Texas, California. Kansas. The list it's become a little overwhelming, to be honest. And all that really took place this year. There was a lot of interest last year.
Right. It's
but
really,
the
dynamic is, I agree.
Yeah.
You're making me think when you're talking about the Holy Spirit. Actually, you mentioned 2016. I'm actually going to go back to 2011. My husband got a job doing research in Spain, And I went with him, and I had a lot of free time, and I just spent it at the Prado. And I just, a lot of the art in our hallway, I just gazed at that for a really long time. And I remember my spiritual director saying, I really think this is preparation for something else for later, you know? This was in 2011. So
It gave me goosebumps.
yeah, I really spent a long time with those paintings. So it's just interesting now, here we are. And it just, it's always good to go back, I think, to what Mr. Kuhn said earlier about the monastery, because it requires quiet time for listening and really trying to see what the Holy Spirit's trying to do with schools. And it really does take the atmosphere of a monastery to be in tune with that. And that's what we try to bring at our school, some of the quiet and some of the gazing and some of the beauty that students would have had in the original Catholic schools, and trying to bring that to our hallways. It's just been such a process, you know?
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's even kind of cultivating. This just kind of came to me right now as a story about the St. John Vianney, but that rather than looking at the art, it's learning to be looked at through the art by the Spirit, putting yourself in that place. So
That's not easy.
Yeah,
It
it's
requires a level of vulnerability that can be hard for our students, although children really in their natural state are more open to it than adults. But it's definitely a learning curve for all of us.
And there's a big difference between what most schools put in their hallways and fine art. Because a lot of schools, you go into their bathrooms or down the hallways and you see posters like, don't bully, be nice. And they're these saccharine, simplistic views of the world that just don't resonate with kids.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen bullying rates decrease. They've in recent years.
due to that signage in back.
Yeah, do that
Due to the
signage in bathrooms. It doesn't resonate. But you put something out there like the Oath of the Hirati, like where you ask real questions like, what does justice look like? What does it mean when we have leaders with feet of clay? And what do you do with someone who does something heroic and then something terrible? And how do you bring justice to that situation? And that's that, and you teach kids to wrestle with that in the nuance and ambiguity and difficulty in hard situations
Without beating them over the head with it.
Yes,
You know, like the
without beating
don't
them over.
bully. Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's hidden. It's something that kids come to, but they don't just come to it once. They come to it over and over and over again, and then it kind of just seeps into their soul. Whereas you look at a poster once, and you've got the entire meaning of the whole thing. It's just one simplistic message.
That's a really good point. And I think
that's it.
these paintings tie in so well with our Socratic seminars. We really are seeing a renaissance of Socratic seminars in our school. We're starting even younger. We all got really inspired at the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education Conference, and we asked those questions that you're bringing up. They're nuanced questions. There's no simple answers. Right now, the kids in 7th, 8th grade are looking at the complicated story of King Arthur. And there's heroes who don't always make the best choices. What does that mean? And we even have a new piece of art depicting something from that story. And those are the kinds of questions the kids will encounter in our Socratic seminars with great literature, with great books. Plus, they're going to see it on the hallway walls. This is a really rich experience for students.
Well, and to that point, they're going to see it on the hallway walls, so it's not going to be just contained in this one seminar. That'll be maybe the introduction to it, but then they're going to be confronted with it over and over and over.
And that is a word that comes up a lot, confrontation. The art does force us to confront difficult things, and different people have different opinions about what's appropriate or what's not appropriate.
It helps us to confront, but it also helps us to resolve those difficult things as well.
It's a good point. And we do want that resolution. We do. That's a really good point.
So, Derek, what prepared you for this? How did you develop this skill set and this? And to also not just the skill set to deal with the schools on the technical level, but to deal with it on the art history level and the spiritual level that you're clearly bringing a lot to these schools.
There is so much to that question, and I will try to break it down. Well, I'll start with skill set because honestly, I think that's the easiest. Through my years running the fine art photography gallery, the landscape photography, so related to what I'm doing, but also very different. Still beautiful, but not this classical sense of beauty. It's just different. It's almost so beauty. I won't even try to explain all that. But the skill set that came about through that would be the technical skills for the kind of restoration work that I do on the images in order to get them ready for print readiness, and then knowing how to translate internal, like in my own mind, how this is going to look in print. So like making adjustments based on the space into which the art is going to go. So it's a little different than somebody calling up art.com and saying I want art in my, or they don't call up art.com, they just click on a website and they
Right.
get something, and it's low quality. I mean, some of them may look good because you know sometimes you'll get the original file will be such that it looks good in its final form from an online retailer like that, but there's no personal interaction, and there's no questioning about what do I need for my space, and how do I size this appropriately, and there's just a whole host of things that doesn't happen when you go that route. And on top of it, the quality of the materials is, so what we're doing with Benedictus, the quality is the best you'll find. And and there's a constant reassessment, like are we the best at what we do, comparing with other printing company, and this is little known, but there are very few companies in the US and likely even the world doing this kind of high quality printing, because there's not a large enough market for it, because they're
Right.
trying to do this mass market retail
Yes.
approach, where I'm not. I don't advertise, I don't market, I don't do anything. I go to conferences and then I let word of mouth spread among schools that I've worked with, and it's working wonderfully, and I feel like that's a way of putting this in God's hands. But back to Doug's question, the skill set, so like all the technical side of things in Photoshop, I just did that for years, working through the gallery, designing spaces, like I said, hotels, offices. I've outlaid larger hotels in my area, in Estes Park. So we're talking about 100 rooms in a hotel, knowing how to size things appropriately for the spaces, and trying to deal with budgetary concerns as well, and how do we balance this. So there's that element of it, and then just how to run a business, which that's honestly my biggest struggle, because I'm more of an artist in mindset than I am a true business person, but I just learn things as I go. So there's things that I still struggle with from the business side of things, but I've got help in that regard. My accountant's wonderful. And then the deeper pieces for me are the formation through, so I went to, my master's is actually through Denver Seminary in spiritual formation and spiritual direction. So it's an actual, like, training me to be professionally a spiritual director. And that's a lot of what I end up doing with the schools that I work with. So a head of school will contact me and say, we want art on our wall, and I will say something to the effect of, well, what do you want that art to do? And then I have the discussion with them, what's the vision for your school?
And then do they start calling you every week to help with their problems?
No, we don't
No?
get, fortunately,
Too
no.
bad.
But there's a
Okay.
lot of dialogue involved.
Yes,
When
yeah.
somebody contacts me and asks me how long will this take before we get art on the wall, it's largely up to them, but at the same time, I say it takes about 2 months from the first contact to, and that's the low end probably, because it just depends on how well developed your vision is to begin with. So one of the chief things that I do is help people craft their vision, and I think that comes about through some of the training and experience I've had with spiritual direction and formation and things like that, because I'm thinking in terms of, so we've got the business itself, which is the design consultation and the art pieces themselves, right? That's kind of the business, but the larger mission is beyond that. It's really partnering with these schools to help them achieve the vision that, like their charism.
And they might not even know what their vision
They don't.
is yet.
Yeah.
But once they have a dialogue with you,
Right.
it really just comes to the surface.
And I love talking to this, and I like the school in Michigan, they're Michigan, Minnesota, I like all these other schools I'm just remembering now, but having the conversations with the decision makers, the heads of school. So there's, usually a couple of people involved. It's not typically just one person. And just the excitement around coming to an understanding that this art is going to help drive what we're trying to achieve in this, what we believe God has given us to achieve in our school. And hearing, I was just at a school in Denver just a few days ago, Bishop Matchbuff, talking with Eric Hoffer, the head of school there, and we were going through the hallways to look at phase 2, because they've already had their first phase, and they have several large pieces. And I helped them. I said, we need to paint the walls, and I showed them the color that I would recommend, and they followed
What color?
They did so their logo has a green to it, like a darker forest greenish type color. So we did that, like a little lighter than that, so that it wasn't too dark on the walls.
Mm-hmm.
So like
a rich color.
A rich green
like
color, yeah. And then with the paintings on the backdrop of this rich green, it's phenomenal. I mean, it changed the space entirely where they put the art. It's beautiful. But getting to talk with him in the hallways and listening to students come up and talk about it, he's like, yeah, I mean, his excitement is wonderful, but then listening to the students respond and talk about their experience with the art, and even the little description plaques because I typically do description plaques that go along with the piece. Either I write them myself or I hand it off to somebody else to write. But listening to them talk about how they connect with the art and how it's changed the way that they walk through the space. So we did a large version of Malay's The Angelus, which you guys have.
We have a
as
small
well.
version in the front
Yep.
office.
We have a really large one in their space.
Do you?
And it's at this crucial point in the hallway. So when I walk through the school, whether virtually or in person, I help them identify, like, okay, if we know the vision that you're trying to achieve. So now, how do we, given the budget that you have and what that budget is going to allow you to do, how do we choose the right space to create the largest impact that help best facilitate this vision? So we chose several places near the front entrance of the school, like in this hallway that is right off the front entrance. But then we had we had enough to do one more piece, and and Eric was walking me through the hallway, and there's this one wall where it's a kind of a nexus of all the students kind of travel this one corridor, and there's this wall that's at a 45-degree angle to the space. And I said, this is a spot. And he had already kind of identified that himself. And I said, yes, this is absolutely a spot. We need to do this. And then so painted that space, put the large Angelus up, and then again listening to the students when I was walking with them just recently, how they talked about how that changed the feel of that space. They said we walk through this space now, and it's totally different. Like the calm that we experience when we walk through this space.
Isn't that beautiful?
I was, and this was unsolicited, so I was kind of blown away by that. I knew that was the impact, but anyway, go ahead.
So how have you seen the art change?
I have. I've been
students
thinking
all the time.
about how the art in our hallways has impacted our students, and I did have a conversation with our teachers too, and I was reflecting on it. I did take a few notes. Last year, I actually got an email from a student who had to leave. She had to move. She was a middle schooler, and she wrote to me and said, thank you so much for all of the wonderful things I got to learn when I was at Holy Child. It was a beautiful blessing to see the true, the good, and the beautiful every day in one place. And then, she proceeded to later talk to me about the art on the hallways and how much she lamented leaving. But she said that really changed her life, seeing it all together, every day in one place. I have seen the students talk to me and the teachers about the art on the hallway, sometimes in ways you don't expect. They notice the tiny little things in each painting. One of the teachers was reminding me last year, one of the kids dressed up, she was a middle schooler, as one of the flowers in the bouquet of the old king, Rouault's old king. She was one of the flowers. That was the thing that she really chose to focus on. So sometimes it's in ways that you don't expect. Every year for Catholic Schools Week, we do Imitation Day, where the kids can dress up as someone on the hallway, and I really like hearing what they have to say. But one of the teachers said the other day, just literally the other day, she heard the third graders having a very scholarly conversation about the art on the hallway. She said that it was very scholarly and very grown up. So that has been interesting also. I also like how I can see the art spawns other things at our school. Case in point, the first graders last week were treated to a science lesson with finches. These birds. Yeah. Well, they're memorizing Gerard Manley Hopkins' poem, which is called As Kingfishers Catch Fire. And it's about the wings and this, that, and the other. And so the way they were talking about science and the feathers, and then they were relating it to beauty and to art on the wall and what happens. And then they were bringing it back to poetry. Whoa, that's exactly what I was hoping to see. And it may not, of course, be perfectly worked out in the mind of the first grader, but it's going to affect them forever.
And it doesn't need to be worked out in the mind, because it's getting worked out interiorly beyond there. When you have that final piece, because I think that's one thing I've seen is these Catholic and classical schools across the country, they've gotten pretty good at the true and the good, but they haven't known what to do with the beautiful. And when you add that final piece to hit that pre-rational place in us, where it accesses the heart, because a lot of times if you're just engaging the mind and potentially the will through the moral, the good, but you're not accessing the heart, which is the seat of desire, then you don't have the engine that actually drives the pursuit of the good and the true.
I do believe that. I've been in Catholic schools for almost 30 years, and I do think that's the missing piece. Because we know our kids are in trouble, society's in trouble, the church is in trouble.
And it's in an image-saturated society,
exactly.
by the way. Yeah.
And, as an educator who's taken a lot of bad education classes, the narrative out there is, you should have a school so kids can express themselves and be free. And we here at Holy Child, we want the kids to see the best that is there, to just see what is something beautiful, so that later when they're discovering who they are, they have something beautiful to look up to, because we're not giving them anything in this society.
You're giving them a vision for themselves, and how do you express yourself if you don't know who you are?
Well, that's the thing. They think if you dye your hair green, then we have saved the kids, but
really
we're missing the point.
Identity.
There is a tremendous loss of identity, and like you said, we try to educate the intellect to know we're a son or a daughter of the Father, but we need, like you said, to get to that pre-rational part of the heart, because the kids are saturated with images in technology 24/7.
Well, we tend to think that things move this way, right? It starts here and goes here, and really we're built differently than that. Like, we engage the world through our senses. That's how we bring in information, and so even like allowing that beauty to just impact us and change that direction from here to here, because again, this is the engine, and this is going to drive all of the other stuff.
And I do really believe Dostoevsky was a prophet in the 19th century. He already saw what was happening, starting with Marxism and what was happening in his country, and he said it's beauty that's going to save the world, and Pope Benedict echoed those thoughts, and I 100% believe it.
I see it right now. I think we're seeing, and I've said this to y'all in private, but I'll say it here, and so hopefully not a ton of people see this. I want a lot of people to see it, but not a ton, because I do believe
this is extra footage. We'll make
but I do believe we're in a new renaissance right now. In America, and maybe in the West. I can't speak to the West at large, but I can say, because of my contact with people across the country and watching what's happening in all these disparate places, but it's the same spirit that's emerging in all these places. I'm working with different artists, because there's more to the business than I've talked about here, but I'm working with different original, like, contemporary artists who paint in the classical style, and watching that arise anew across the country. I think there's, and again, with just what's happening with education, I think that we really are, and we'll call it a small R renaissance right now, but I mean, we're seeing a new renaissance, and I think it's a work of the Spirit that's counteracting all the darkness that we're seeing out there, as the encroaching darkness. So anyway,
I think people are recognizing more and more how broken our culture is, and they're looking for something solid, something that will be able to prepare their children to face the difficulties in life and a very broken culture, and have success in their life. And that doesn't come with a simplistic presentation of God wants us to be happy. That comes with really dealing with the nature of God, the nature of humans, the nature of sin and our brokenness, and then the nature of redemption. And those are very deep topics that that it's very difficult to reach people with, especially in today's culture where people's minds are so closed. But if you can bring things out, if you could open people's hearts first through beauty, through visions of love. I mean, I think, one of the biggest reasons that intact families, for instance, are so much more successful on average than broken families in passing on the faith to their kids is the kids grow up with an inherent vision of beauty in the relationship of the mother and the father.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just inherently beautiful, and it draws kids. They want that for them, their own children, when they're grown up. Whereas kids from a broken family have a lot more negativity associated with a family life, a lot more ugliness there, and it repels them oftentimes. It's difficult, and I say that as a single parent, that I've recognized that my from a family life is not going to be beautiful and attractive to my kids, so I need to supplement that and just surround them with other families that have that healthier, more beautiful life, and so they can have a model for themselves.
But that's the role of the church, right?
Yes.
And in the school environment, in the Catholic school environment. I mean, that's how God provides the way. This is the body at work, because there's always going to be broken families through through no fault of our own or through our fault. Who cares? But He's providing a larger family. It's the family of God that we're called into.
And it's these things that are really subconscious, that we don't even recognize, that have often the biggest effect on whether our kids stay in the faith, are able to establish themselves successfully in the world. Can they situate themselves? Can they create a narrative of their life? I think Scott Adams, the Dilbert creator, says everyone lives in their own little movie in their head, right? So can kids create a narrative of their life that is rich enough to handle the complexity of the world? And that happens when we surround them with great literature, with great works of art, with great beauty. Then those great works, they're not simplistic, they're rich, they're nuanced. And if they're beautiful and they call us to the true and the good, then they can draw out in our kids a vision of their own life. What could their own life look like?
That's it.
So it could be beautiful. And then when people have that vision, then they realize, there's a use for the church. Like going off and, climbing mountains every weekend, and
hey, you're getting close to home there.
And traveling and just traveling the world, maybe this isn't as rich a life as I thought it was going to be. Maybe there's more to this life than just entertaining myself and playing video games all day. And how do I build that vision and then go live it out?
Yeah.
I think also you're making an important point when you talk about the importance of community. I'll throw out that corny phrase, it takes a village.
I mean, that was the
it takes a village. Well, because I'm just thinking in terms of I know what I always wanted for my students, but I'm not an engineer, I'm not an artist. I could never do any of this. And then even thinking about when we first put the first few pieces of art on the wall, I paid for some staff members paid for it, and an old friend of my husband's who's not Catholic walked in the building and said, just said, Janice, what do I need to do to pay for the rest of the building? Yep. The art just sold itself, and he has since subsequently paid for every portion of this building because he cares about our country and our future.
And we should say that this is 4 years. Like, we have been working together for 4 years.
Yes.
Y'all are the ones that started it all for, as we said previously, but this doesn't happen overnight.
Doesn't happen overnight, and it's not something you can do by yourself. So if I think about our donor, Kurt, who is my husband's friend, but he treats me like a sister, and then I think about the skill set that you both have, it does take a team. And of course, I don't want to forget Mrs. Doherty, who was here long before I was, who laid the foundation of a real art community here at Holy Child.
Well, and real art instruction for the kids, where they actually learn to draw and to paint and to do so beautifully.
I can't emphasize that enough. Like, we're bringing up the great books, the great works of art, all these beautiful things that are thousands of years old, when right here at Holy Child, since its inception, kids learned how to draw. That's a big deal nowadays, and it's pretty rare. And Mrs. Doherty is a rare hidden gem.
She is a gem, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
she doesn't teach arts and crafts for art class.
No. And I want to
real
add
art.
a plug that our new art instructor, Mrs. Kubek, who's wonderful. I was just giving a tour to her family members, and she said it as a badge of honor. She's like, Mrs. Martinez hired me because I never am going to teach arts and crafts. Because that was the one, when I hired her, that was one of the questions, like, are you going to teach drawing or arts and crafts?
Yeah.
So we're on the same page, you know?
Yeah.
And when I hired her, the first question I asked her was, is beauty in the eye of the beholder? Yes or no? This poor woman, I put her on the spot. And she said, nobody's ever done this to me before. But she had an answer, and her answer had 3 Latin words, you know? She knew that beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. There are objective elements, and that's the kind of person I want here at Holy Child to continue the legacy that Mrs. Doherty began.
Well, and have an education in drawing. I mean, you start to learn what beauty is, because there is a subjective element to beauty.
Yes.
But we have to also form our ability to appreciate what is truly beautiful, because we don't know. We're being told, we're in a culture that tells us what is beautiful.
Yes.
That is not beautiful. In fact, it's quite the opposite a lot of the time. And so having that kind of instruction to teach us, you know, what are these objective elements of beauty? Because beauty is, this needs qualification, but beauty is God. Anything that's truly beautiful is truly God, of God. And so we have to, there's an education that has to take place so that we can actually recognize beauty when we see it. So we saturate the hallways with it, but then there has to be actual intellectual instruction. So again, you hit the pre-rational, but you hit the rational as well.
And I'm going to end with a commercial for the Brothers Karamazov, because in that novel, the characters are obsessed with beauty, but like you just said, they need some instruction, and they come to find that God is beauty himself, and the other beauty on the earth, it guides us, but it can also get in the way, and that's the lesson of the novel. So, returning to the topic of funds and donors.
The teachers and staff at this school are so dedicated that even though they're making way less than they would anywhere else, that they're willing to kick this off by funding it.
Yeah, exactly. The people involved themselves
parents
will pay for it. Yeah.
There's been no tuition money. There's been no parish money.
So one thing I do when a school contacts me is I ask them about their funding. How are they planning on doing this? So like, what do you want to do right now? And I tell them, I don't want to outlay your entire school. And number one, that's going to be terribly expensive depending on the size of the school. But also, it does nothing to build the community of the school. I mean, you are a couple of people making decisions for the whole school. Like, this does nothing to benefit it. There's benefit for sure. Again, facilitating the vision of the school, all of that. But in the more globally, what we want to do is build the community around the school. And so I say, let's choose the impact point. Like, where's the space that's going to help facilitate the achievement of this vision that you have? But that you can also bring people into the space, parents, donors, people that would potentially contribute to outlaying the entire school with art, and again, towards the full achievement of the art display to facilitate the achievement of the vision for the school. And so I say, let's choose this one space, and it usually costs, I mean, it's usually several $1,000s, $10,000, $15,000, whatever it happens to be, but you set that first stage up, and then you get donors to come into the space, and
art
that's
sells
what
itself.
It sells itself, exactly. And so it's not, you don't have to think in terms of how are we going to do this, because it will take care of itself. And again, I believe that's a movement of the Holy Spirit as well.
That's a good point. I just had a teacher contact me and say, when is your next art order? I want to buy a piece. I'll have people from the parish call. I had a parent say, I want to surprise my wife. buy a piece in her honor. So people do call me and say, I'd like to get a piece. And so now our focus is on furnishing the old building, and you can, the art just sells itself.
It does. And what that does though is it gives people buy-in. It creates a deeper loyalty to the community because they feel like they've had a more active part in the in the crafting of this community.
Well, and we've had each part of our process, we've involved the community in voting for art, and I thought that was instructive and that was fun. And we have Paul Revere on our walls, who I didn't vote for. That's a great case. That's not the piece I wanted, but that was who our community chose. So we do always try to involve the community in some way or the other. And I would also like to say the beginning and the end of our hallway have special pieces that represent school spirit. Mrs. D put Snap the Whip because we want our kids to have that joyful,
joie de vivre.
Thank you. Yes, that's what we want. And at the end of the hallway, we have these beautiful horses because we have horses near our property who've literally jumped over the fence into our playground.
You also have Cezanne's Old Woman Praying the Rosary.
Because we pray the rosary.
That's
right.
Yep. So let's resume our conversation about the St. Luke Guild, shall we? Okay. Tell us, what was the original purpose of the St. Luke Guild?
The original purpose was to hold the art in trust for Holy Child, and our art project was entirely focused on Holy Child, and to own the art and to completely separate the finances so that people would know just clearly that the art wasn't coming from the school and from the parents, from tuition money. We just purchased this building, and we didn't want an expensive art project to be a distraction from people who might want to help pay for the building, because not everyone has had a conversion about beauty and recognizes the importance. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people still, especially in American culture, with its extreme utilitarian tendencies, think that art is a waste. And so we wanted to send the message directly to the community that this is only being funded by people who love art and who are doing so voluntarily. I think sometimes that message can get lost because we haven't had to ask people to donate. So people sometimes may forget that or not know where the art is coming from because we haven't had to ever ask for money. People always just come up and say, hey, can I pay for a piece of artwork? That's how it's happened. But the original purpose was focused on the Holy Child community as the diocese was going through bankruptcy and all the other things going around.
Have you seen that original vision change or develop or grow?
Very much so, because as we got into providing this art for our school, one of the things that happened very early on was someone from ICLE came.
Institute of Catholic Liberal Education.
Yes, and said, wow, they were so impressed by the art in hallways, they immediately invited you out to speak. And then so the St. Luke Guild and Benedictus art also spoke. So it was a team presentation at ICLE. And the vision changed to, like, can we help other schools do what we've done? So we put together a booth, teamed with Derek on this so that we could go to conferences and say, is there interest in other schools doing this, and how can we assist you? And there very much is interest. Mm-hmm. The interest has been so much that I believe you quit your job.
I had to. Yeah, things got so busy, and I didn't try to make this happen. This has happened, and so I had to. I could not keep up, and I still can't keep up. So that's where things are now.
Mm-hmm. and so there's a hunger, and also, this wasn't possible 10 years ago, because we didn't have the plethora of high quality digital images of masterpiece paintings that normally reside in museums. so we couldn't bring it. And we also didn't have just the printing methods at a low enough cost for museum quality prints. They were too expensive. So the reduction in cost of museum quality prints with 100-year UV protection and 13 color ink that can really capture the blacks. Mrs. D likes to say that the way you can tell a really high quality print from non high quality is that blacks look black and not blue.
We came up with this at Great Hearts. I think it's true black, not blue black.
Yes,
yeah.
True black, not blue black, and so that's something that you just don't see in these prints from likeart.com that Benedictus Art is able to bring to schools. So both of these things are allowing something that wasn't possible even a decade ago to be possible now, and there's also a hunger there, a spiritual hunger for beauty that is really coming to the fore. We talked a little bit about Jordan Peterson earlier. I mean, I think he has done more to promote beauty and the importance of it and to speak to it in a way that even men can understand, because a lot of education on beauty is just targeted on the pretty, or it's communicated in ways that men just didn't find relatable.
What does he say about beauty that would appeal to men?
It's hard to even quantify that.
Okay.
But he talks about the importance. He talks about the monetary value of beauty and the fact that it's impossible to quantify. Like, we don't know how to do that. It's not that it's impossible necessarily, but nobody knows how to do that. Nobody knows how to monetize beauty. Like, if they could, people would just be producing works of great beauty all the time because it's so valuable. It drives so much tourism to Europe, for instance. Their cathedrals, their paintings, their museums, they drive so much tourism. There's so much monetary value there, but nobody knows how to capture that in any scientific way, really. One of the inspirations, I don't want to say that, but one of the ideas we had is that, I wonder if we could make a case that that these projects can pay for themselves to convince donors maybe to help buy more art, and that it communicates, it's a signal to potential parents that we take your children's education very seriously, and we're different, and we value beauty in very tangible ways. And so there's actually a study going on or being considered right now I believe with the University of Dallas.
They've kind of backed away at the moment, but it's with AHEART Solutions.
With AHEART Solutions
and Benedictus Art. So looking at the qualitative and quantitative impacts through kind of a survey-based approach to see what can we determine, like with hard empirical data, how beauty in the school environment impacts all these different factors, the education of the student, like what it does to the staff, what it does to the wider community around the school. And I've dropped the ball on that one a little bit. We're still moving forward, but it's just been so busy that now that I've got a really good cross section of schools in different socioeconomic brackets as well. Libertas, I forgot about this school. Libertas School, I don't know how I forgot about them. They're wonderful, but Libertas School in Memphis is in a really underserved, like one of the two poorest, or I don't know if poorest is the right word, but a really underserved part of Memphis. But they brought art into their school, and just the impact that they have expressed to me, anecdotally, of what this has done for their students, and they are just like over the moon about this. And I just love seeing schools like have this vision of like, we need to show that, because what it does, especially in an environment where dignity is hard to come by,
Yes.
that it shows these students that who cares what your socioeconomic status is. This isn't, like, you are somebody of dignity and value and beauty, and we want to show that to
I think
you.
that's a really important point, especially a lot of young people base their dignity on a social media platform, and just as we were talking about earlier, that lack of identity. So I think that's a very important point that you bring up.
Yeah.
What are your long-term vision, future projects for the St. Luke Guild looking like?
Well, we have two projects that we're looking to implement in the next few years. It's all done by overloaded volunteers, so things
sounds
happen
very familiar.
very slowly. But we want to try to get some donations and grant money, potentially to put together traveling exhibits. So get together 10 Vermeers or 10 paintings focused on a particular person in history, like Mary, the Mother of God, as shown through the great art, and send those out into the community, both to new schools who are considering this and want to introduce it to their community in a low-cost manner. Bring in a dozen paintings for 6 months and say, how does our community respond to this? Is this something that they're interested in? And how does our staff respond to this? How do the students respond to this? Just try it out. And also for schools that have been doing this for a while, and this is originally why we wanted to do it. It's like, we're going to put in close to 100 paintings here at Holy Child. And kids are going to live with those for
9
8
years potentially. 10 years potentially.
Potentially 10 years
And
if
by
they're
the
here through
way,
pre-K.
There's currently about 70 on the walls. So
This is good to talk about. Yeah.
So we have 70 paintings now, and the younger kids or the current crop of kids have only been with it for a few years, but after a while they're going to be with them for longer, and it would be good to generate interest, to bring in and change out the art on the walls a little bit, so that there's a little bit of variety.
Mm-hmm.
So in your long-term vision for St. Luke Guild, you're interested in traveling exhibits. What else?
So we're also developing a database.
Tell us about the database.
Okay. So we're developing a database of the greatest works of art in the Western canon, and we're also tying that into different art curricula, so that schools that are not quite sure what to put on their walls have a starting point, at least.
Wow, that's really...
So
how much progress have you made on the database?
So we have, I think, 500
really
pieces of art in the database.
And what does it start with? Like, what's the beginning point? Is it chronological, or how is it arranged?
Right now, it's mostly been me doing the work, to be honest.
Oh.
We need volunteers if anyone wants to help.
But are you doing it thematically?
I go in and I look in a place like Wikipedia, or I go through we have every piece in the AP Art History curriculum in our database.
Oh, interesting.
So that was one that someone from Bishop Matchabuff High School, she was helping for a bit, and she provided that to us.
Okay.
So we got that in there. We don't have the user interface worked out yet.
And tell us what user interface is.
So it's like how someone who wants to select works of art would go through that process on a screen. So say they're looking for a Renaissance painting, or they're looking for a certain theme.
I see.
Like Abraham, they would be able to search that, and then they will be able to say, okay, are there any pieces of that are in any art curricula? So that's a way.
This is ambitious.
Outsourcing the idea of what are the greatest works of art, because it's so controversial. But one way to do it is to say the greatest works of art are art that show up in lots of different art history curricula. If something is in lots of different art history curricula, then you have experts, teachers who have said that's something worth teaching. And that's something you might want to put on the wall of your school, because they're going to be learning about it in class.
So if something is repeated often in different curriculum, this is going to be something worthy of putting in that database.
Yeah,
because it's a familiar piece somewhat.
And it's a way to crowdsource the idea of what are the greatest works of art. You're crowdsourcing that to people who have dedicated their life to teaching it to kids or to adults.
Yes.
And I would say it's a starting point.
Yeah, it's a starting point. It's not the be all and end all.
Right.
But it is a way to come up with the core of your art pieces that you do in your selection. And then maybe there's a special devotion or that you have to a certain saint, say in a Catholic school, or say you're a Protestant school and you're very into U.S. history, then you're going to want to pull more pieces from a certain subject area. And having a resource that's searchable and easy to navigate, that's a project we're working on. It's a very difficult project.
It is. But this would, I think, be especially helpful for brand new schools, right?
Yes.
Because they want to have something beautiful, but they may not have a history yet to draw from, So this would be a great place for them to start.
I know in the little bit of work I've done, and probably Derek can speak a lot more to this, but the little bit of work I've done with schools that are looking at putting art in their hallways, they're often asking the teachers, what are you most interested in for the artwork? And they may even end up with duplicates in different classrooms.
Well, they ask me.
That's
a lot of what I do is
Yes.
helping. So I'll create the whole narrative structure for the art. Like, here's the story that we're trying to tell to facilitate the vision, which I enjoy, but there's I could choose 50 works for one particular component of that vision. So I've been working with a school in Michigan on one of their what we'll call their impact hallway. It's going to be their starting point, and it's just this. They have these 3 virtues. It's Oakdale Academy in Michigan, and there are 3 virtues: are character, wisdom, and truth. And so how we choose paintings beautiful. That and again the larger charism of schools that are in this classical or this liberal education realm, and they tend to be religious, like Christian Catholic schools, either broadly Christian or specifically Catholic. It's generally, especially with us Catholics, it's to make saints, right? So that's the broad charism, but everybody's got their own particular charism that's been communicated to them through, that they know that this is actually the heart of what we do. And so how do I bring art into that space? Because a lot of times they don't have any, they'll have a favorite piece. So for instance, the school in Michigan, the head of school loves Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal Son, which is one of my favorites as well. So I'm we can absolutely do that in this character, truth, wisdom concept, because really character starts with humility, and that's what we're seeing. That's one of the components of that story, Return of the Prodigal Son, is this deep humility. That's the foundational virtue for all virtues. That's what you can see that written through the lives or through the writings of the saints throughout history. We know that this is this fundamental starting point, but then how do we choose art that both captures all of these virtues that they want, and then leads the student or whoever through the hallway, so that they end up. So the last piece right now that we haven't fully made the final determination, but the last piece is The Sower by Van Gogh, because after your character has been formed, it's not meant you've reached or your heart has been drawn into deeper union with Christ, but that's not meant to be kept to yourself. So as you're formed in virtue, you go and sow the seeds of the gospel that's the last piece as you kind of turn the hall to walk out of the school. So what Doug's doing with St. Luke Guild, having that database would be very helpful.
And that would help people discover what their charism, because not everyone wakes up and says, I know what my charism is, right? It's a lot of self-discovery, group discovery.
I would say a lot of the schools I deal with, they know. Or when they tell me what their vision is,
you can figure it out.
I can pinpoint the piece that I'm in fact, I was just doing this school in Wisconsin just the other day where I was he's reading this long mission statement, and I said, boom, right there. He had this small prepositional phrase, and I said, that's the charism right there. Not defining it for him, but just saying this is what's unique, because I have a broad a broad basis for being able to pick something like that out, because I hear these from schools across the country. I'm saying this is actually pretty unique to you, so this is probably a focal point.
But having that database would sure make that
exactly.
easier.
That's why I'm going to transition that back, because a database that you're talking about, I've been excited about this ever since you started talking about it. So.
And where did the idea come from?
From my head.
Okay.
It's I don't know. These are things that just, as we started on this project,
4 years
back in 2019, late 2019, early 2020, I guess, is when I took you and Mrs. D up to the monastery. It's very focused on Holy Child, and I think the first 4 to 5 years is going to be focused very much on getting the art into Holy Child and getting a proof of concept in place of what can we do with this. And then the next 5 years with the St. Luke Guild, I envision that is like, how can we take what we've learned here at Holy Child, pioneering this unique method of displaying art to kids with very high quality masterpiece paintings. How do we share that with the rest of the country? And how do we produce tools for them to make their life easier? What are the pain points in other schools implementing this? What are the hurdles that they struggle overcoming? And can we help them do that? What are things that we can do to smooth the process out and make it easier and more efficient without losing and this is really hard, because you don't want something that's so easy that's like AI generating a bunch of paintings for you. Yeah. You want the school has to really think about what they want their vision to be. They really, if they want to do this well, there has to be a lot of thought that goes into that. But then in making the rest of the vision happen, making that process easier, the selection of the art pieces, because a lot of schools, they know what they want, but they're not art historians necessarily. They're people that are coming to themselves, often through recent conversions, on the importance of beauty and the role of beauty in faith, in the church, in our daily lives, if they want to be lived well. And so they may need a little bit of assistance in culling through the tens of thousands of paintings and finding the ones that really express the vision they have and bring that to the fore while maintaining the world-class quality that they're looking for. And that's the goal.
And on that note too, like for anybody that might be listening, it's not a matter of choosing the quote. There's the one. You know, it's not one right one. There's going to be multiple pieces that could possibly help fulfill that vision. It's just there are so many, especially on particular themes. Like somebody was talking to me yesterday about the Annunciation. I'm like, oh, okay. There's only about 40,000 works on the Annunciation out there, but there are certain works that stand out above the crowd. And so, for various reasons, you know, one of my favorites is Henry Tanner's version of the Annunciation. Which you have. So having a database like that to help them, so that they're not doing the Wikipedia search to try to find some version of the Annunciation, or Fra Angelico's The Annunciation, which is in Matchbook.
Or you could just pull out all your books from college that are in your garage.
Right. All my books, all my art history stuff is sitting on my my coffee table right now.
Yeah,
I just keep buying stuff. But anyway, yeah, but just that there's not one perfect piece, but there are several representative pieces that are possible, so that somebody doesn't get overwhelmed by thinking that they have to choose like the exact right piece, because there's no such thing. Mm-hmm. There may be something that's revealed to you that should be on your walls, or something that lies deeply in your heart that you really want to see. But if you're doing multiple pieces, that's likely not going to be the case, that you've got 7 pieces that you, like, I just know I need these on my wall. Like, there may be one, and that's great, but you don't have to, it's not about perfection, it's just about choosing well to help fit your vision. And I come at this from almost an Ignatian discernment standpoint. This would be like maybe even like a third order discernment, where it's a list of pros and cons. Like here's, okay, so I want to show the Annunciation. So here are the pros of having these different pieces, and here are the cons of having these different pieces on my wall. Like what aspects of objectively of beauty, like harmony, order, proportion, or that are represented in these different works that I might choose from, so that I know I want the Annunciation, but I don't know how to choose which is which. And so having, again, this database that is kind of culled from some of this large corpus of works. Well, that's pretty anyway, that and that we can then, so we've now got a database, a resource that we can come to, that that has narrowed this down for us, so that our selection process becomes easier. And again, knowing that it's not about choosing the perfect piece, it's just about choosing well.
And as a lot of schools put displays in, it's important to potentially, at least we've considered important, to balance the painters from different eras of art history. So that's that sort of interweaving, and so to be able to make sure that you're not too heavy in one area, not heavy enough. So developing the tools to help schools evaluate these things is going to be a major focus of the St. Luke Guild going forward.
Yeah.
We're starting with the database. So we have these, the next things that big projects that we're looking for are developing a handful, starting with just one, like traveling exhibits, and then also the database. And those are, I think that's enough for us for now.
Yeah.
We also have fee-free credit card processing already in place. We have fundraising tools. We thought that was going to be, initially we thought that was going to be a bigger need because that was Holy Child's biggest worry. Because we had Mrs. D, the art selection process went a lot easier. It still took hundreds of hours, to be frank.
Yep.
I mean, hundreds of hours just to go through all the pieces.
That doesn't mean it's going to take that long for everybody, but it took them a while, yeah.
Yeah, it took us a while. That's one reason I thought the database would be good for schools, is a way to make that process go faster. And also it was just so collaborative, especially between Mrs. Martinez with her vision of, she wants to put a timeline of world history in, and Mrs. D's vision, and she wants the best works of the Western canon in, and she is less concerned about the timeline, capturing all the elements of the timeline. So capturing all the greatest artists with all the key elements of the timeline in St. Jerome's curriculum, I think that is what took us a very long
But
time.
I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
Oh no,
It was
I
a lot
think
of fun.
yeah.
It was really just.
I just want to make
Rich.
sure people don't get overwhelmed because this
Yes.
typically this is
It can
it's
be
not
overwhelming.
but it's not as involved a process as what y'all have done.
Yeah,
it's just
Mrs.
not.
D and I are intense. We're
Yeah.
both intense.
And
Yeah.
we had a project where we had two very strong personalities
Yeah.
Yep.
with very conflicted goals.
Yep.
I would say conflicted,
well,
but
potentially.
potentially
More
but,
difficult to harmonize.
Yes, very difficult to harmonize.
But we both had the same umbrella vision, right?
Oh,
we
yeah.
love the West.
Oh yeah.
We love what's already considered
Oh,
beautiful.
yeah.
We want to preserve Western civilization.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
That's a big
Well,
one.
preserve and advance.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
So all right. So
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about the St. Luke Guild?
I think we've hit on most of it. This has been a great fun working on this project with both of you. I did want to ask the two of you. You know, we've pioneered something here at Holy Child that up until this point hadn't been done before, and this is going out now to other schools. Have you received conference speaking opportunities? We talked a little bit with the ICLE. Have you had others as follow-ups, and have you had write-ups, news articles about this? Tell us a little bit about the recognition that Holy Child and Benedictus of Art have gotten.
One thing that's been really interesting to watch is Mrs. Rogers, who's the foundress of this school, has been helping the John Paul II Independent School in Wichita. They came and visited our school for help really with teaching and curriculum, but they fell in love with the art on the hallways. And when they saw the art, the principal and a couple of teachers said, "We want this at our school." And so I just recently was invited to be their keynote speaker at their fundraising event, and the art was unveiled while I was there. And it was really moving for me to watch them unveil the Snap the Whip by Homer that we have here, that they wanted in their school. That was really just, I'm still really processing that because they loved that piece. So they have pieces that we have, and then they chose some of their own. But I thought it was really amazing that it all started here, and then seeing how it's affecting those families over there in Kansas, that was really moving for me, and it's really been making me think.
So has Holy Child received any write-ups or been featured in any news articles?
We had a write-up from the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education
Oh yeah.
about the art here. Just kind of a funny side note, I was asked to help teachers teach the Catholic Textbook Project history books. And while I was sitting right here, that painting that's moved now was in the background, and a couple of people, they weren't listening to anything I said about history. They put in the chat box and raised their hand and said, "Tell us about that painting behind you." So that was kind of interesting. Like, I was hired to talk about history, but we ended up talking about art. Actually, now that you make me think, the Archdiocese of Denver asked me to speak to their teachers about history and Marxism, and I used art in my talk as a way to counter that. And so I got to talk a little bit about the art in our hallways. Something I'm sure Marx would have never dreamed of.
Nope. So for Benedictus write-ups, Catholic school playbook, I think. There's a brief mention
Yes,
there.
that's right.
Also ICLE, a little write-up there. Maybe some other places. Just recently, we're writing ourselves now. I just started on Substack, which is, for those not familiar, is a kind of a blog website. I don't exactly know how, like more long-form articles and things like that.
It's a publishing platform for journalists and writers to get their subject matter directly to audiences.
Right. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while because of the speaking opportunities that I've had. I've been getting asked a lot to do or not a lot, but I've done several workshops and I've been asked to do more. One for the Archdiocese of Denver, one for Anthem Classical in Fayetteville, at least for their parent group. But just doing workshops on how to pray with art, so Visio Divina, and which is a form. It's like Lectio Divina for those that are familiar. It's a kind of a prayer. Well, to say it very crassly, it's just a prayer format, but it's a lot more than that. But Visio would just be using a painting rather than a text for the time of prayer, and just leading workshops on that. I've done several of those already, with more to come, and yeah, I feel like there's something else that I'm missing, but Exodus 90 actually asked me to talk at their conference coming up in Estes Park, which is where I live, so that was convenient. But
wow,
they asked
wonderful.
me if I would be one of their 12 speakers.
Look at how it's just spreading out in all different directions.
And this one isn't so much on art, but more on kind of spiritual formation. But art's involved at this point. It's just kind of infused in all aspects of my life, because I'm actually planning on having a little 5x7 card that'll have a work of art featuring Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, because that's how I'm going to talk about my particular topic for the conference. But having a piece of art on the front of the card that they can use as a contemplative entrance into the garden, and on the back will be kind of a format of prayer that they can follow in order to identify with him in the garden, so that they can turn their will over to the Father just as he did.
Well, this is a whole other podcast.
It is, yeah.
topic.
We don't have to talk about that.
Whew, okay.
But it was another speaking
That's
opportunity.
wonderful.
And have you been able to work with architects at all? And
Yeah. So I work with. Go ahead, finish your question.
So I guess the question is, a lot of people, for instance, Holy Child, we're very constrained in what we can do. I mean, for financial reasons, New Mexico is not a rich state. We're not a large parish. Maybe 500
Our building
families.
doesn't have columns.
So we we got to use portable.
Yeah.
That's our school, and so it was one of the motivating factors of putting art on the wall, just bringing beauty to a building that was inherently quite ugly and utilitarian.
You can transform a utilitarian space very affordably. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but for communities with more money to integrate beauty from the ground up in their school design, are there any architects that you know of that can do that?
Well, the primary one, it would be that I've seen anyway, was the Nick Charbonneau with Harrison Design.
Okay.
They're based out of New York, LA, and I think London. or maybe it's somewhere else in the U.S. But anyway, but they have a whole division of their architecture firm that's focused on sacred. So the transformation of either either renovations or ground up construction of churches and schools. And so one thing I've been able to do is connect them with other schools that are interested, because I talked to Nick and I said, what's the cost of your services? And he's like, we work with super small to super large. They're dealing with multi-million-dollar projects and down to, but they're, even $100,000, which may sound like a lot, but for some schools that's in the realm of affordability and like what they can do to help transform that space, because their vision, the reason I work with him, he asked me to work with him, is that there's an alignment of vision. That he sees the same thing that I see, the same thing that you all see, that we need to, that the architecture needs to be beautiful as well, to the extent that we're able, right? I mean, there's obviously going to be limits, and those limitations are not bad things. Those are, again, that's the Spirit works within limitations, and he's doing something. He's always trying to make each of us saints. We need to remember that it's not even just about the entire community, but it's about each of us as individuals. But anyway, so one of the projects that Harrison Design asked me to help with, or Nick specifically, was a school that's it's being, I think, renovated out in Massachusetts. And so he sent me the schematics of the entry hall, and he said, we've already created the spaces for the art, so you fit the art to the space, and then send this back to us. And so I said, okay, well, what is the head of school, what is his vision for this space, or for the school actually? And so what I ended up doing in that space was I took the schematic, and I didn't really have much experience reading architectural schematics, but figured it out because I'm brilliant. So what I did was I led as you enter the school. So it's laid out that when you walk into the school, you've got the entry hall, and then the double doors at the back of the entry hall lead into the library, and then and then it's just walls on each side with columns and spaces fit for art. So you walk into the school, and on your left, I start with the pagan philosophers, because they were seekers of the truth, although they didn't have the fullness of the truth, right? And so that leads, as you get to the back of the entry hall, and the walls on the second floor and on the first floor, you've got on the bottom, you've got School of Athens. So this is the culmination of all the pre-Christian truth, right? So all these guys gathered in one place, and then above them you've got the Jews moving in from. I think I did manna in the wilderness, and then right above the library, I think it was Joshua leading the Israelites across the Jordan into the Promised Land. With the idea being that the library is kind of like the Promised Land, right? But the Promised Land was never meant to be the end point. This isn't the end of the journey. This is a waypoint along the way. This is something communicative of God's promise to His people, calling them into the divine light, into partakers in the divine nature through Christ. And so as you walk back out of the library, you've got the Annunciation. So now we've gone into the Promised Land with the Jews. We come back out, and so on the opposite, or on the wall to the other side of the doorway from School of Athens, now we have the Annunciation. Now we have the fullness of truth being revealed, and being, through Mary's fiat, Christ comes into the world. And then we walk onto the hall. As you're walking back out of the entry hall, on the opposite wall, we've got the Holy Family. The crucifixion is like a centerpiece, because that's this is the culmination of Jesus' mission here on earth. And then we've got the vision in kind of in the crucifixion, it's the resurrection and everything, but it's Velasquez is the crucifixion. And anyway, the piece next to that is the vision to Saint Benedict of the Holy Trinity. So now we're getting the fuller revelation of the truth, right? Because we didn't have this Trinitarian understanding. It was always present, but right. Our understanding of it came through revelation over time. And then as you walk back out of the school, as you walk back out into the world, above the entry doors that are also the exit doors, obviously, you've got Adoration of the Mystic Lamb by Van Eyck, which Doug actually found a way to put this thing together, but and it's here in the halls of Holy Child. But so the idea being that as you walk back out into the world, here's the source and summit of your faith. Remember that this is what you are called to. this is who you follow, and what you are called to do is to preach him to live, in your words and in your life, to preach him to the world.
This is a fitting point for I want to close with the Von Eyck piece, because I'm teaching our third graders First Communion, and we were talking about different things, and I just said, let's just go look at the lamb, and we looked at it and we talked about it in relation to the Eucharist, and what happened when we were looking at it and closing up our lesson. There's just no words.
Exactly. And
It's
that's how it
just,
should be.
wow, just having a piece of art like that to
It impacts,
bring to the kids.
It's that ineffability.
Yeah.
And which, again, God is truly ineffable. He gives us words for how to communicate him and how to relate to, interact, understand him.
Yeah.
But he's ineffable, because he is just
That
so
was
far
just,
beyond us.
yeah,
It's a
such an
fitting end.
experience, and we never could have done it without both of you.
Yeah.
So thank you.
High five.